The soft blue glow from the monitoring screens lit up Lieutenant James Miller's face as he stifled a yawn. Third watch on Epsilon 9 station was always the quietest. Most nights, Miller would count the hours until his shift ended, watching the empty sensor readings while sipping lukewarm coffee from the station's mediocre dispenser. Tonight was different. A sharp beep broke the silence. Miller sat up straight, nearly spilling his coffee. The long-range sensors had picked up something big entering the sector. "Computer, verify reading," Miller said, tapping commands into his console. Verification complete. Unknown vessel detected at coordinates 227 to 489,053. The computer's emotionless voice responded. Miller's heart raced. The outer defense perimeter was designed to detect any approaching ships well before they reached human space. Nothing should be able to just appear like this. "Computer, send recognition signal and request identification." Signal sent. No response. Miller hit the yellow alert button. Within seconds, the quiet monitoring room filled with personnel. The station's lighting shifted to amber, and Captain Teller rushed in with his uniform half-buttoned. "Report, Lieutenant," Teller demanded, eyes fixed on the main screen. "Sir, we have an unidentified vessel that appeared at the edge of Sector 7. It's broadcasting no recognition codes, and it's not responding to hails." Teller leaned over Miller's shoulder, studying the readouts. "Size: massive, sir. Initial scans suggest it's 3 times the size of our largest battleship." The room grew quiet. Earth's fleet had never encountered anything that large before. "Could it be a malfunction?" someone asked. Miller shook his head. "I've run 3 verification scans. Whatever it is, it's real, and it's moving toward the Jupiter colony at a steady pace." Teller straightened his back. "Show me the energy readings." Miller pulled up the data. The room filled with gasps. "Those weapon signatures," whispered Commander Davis from Tactical. "They're off the charts. Nothing in our database matches this configuration." Teller's face hardened. "Send everything to Earth Command. Now. And raise the alert to red." The station's lights shifted to a deep crimson as the alert status increased. Miller's fingers flew across his console, sending the data package through the quantum relay. His mind raced with the implications. In 10 years of service, he had never seen anything like this. "Sir," called out Ensign Parker from the communications station. "Earth Command acknowledges receipt of data. Admiral Thompson wants to speak with you immediately." Teller nodded and moved to the private comm station. The rest of the crew continued working, but Miller could feel the tension building. Whatever this vessel was, it wasn't friendly. No peaceful ship approached silently, refused to identify itself, or carried weapon systems that powerful. The main screen suddenly flickered as new data appeared. "Sir," Miller called out, "the vessel has increased speed. It's now on a direct course for our station." Teller returned, his face pale. "Earth Command has ordered us to maintain position and continue monitoring. The battle cruiser Dauntless is being dispatched from Jupiter. ETA 4 hours." Miller looked at the trajectory calculations. "Sir, at its current speed, that vessel will reach us in 3 hours." The room fell silent again as the implications sank in. They were alone against an unknown enemy with overwhelming firepower. "They also sent new scanning protocols," Teller added. "Something about looking for specific radiation signatures." Miller ran the new scans. The results made his blood run cold. "Sir, I'm detecting the same radiation signature as the Proxima Centauri incident." Everyone knew what that meant. 3 months ago, the research outpost at Proxima Centauri had gone silent. When investigators arrived, they found nothing but debris. "Sound General Quarters," Teller ordered, "and power up the emergency transmitter. If we can't stop them, we need to at least warn Earth about what's coming." Miller nodded grimly, realizing that Epsilon 9 might be humanity's first and last line of defense against whatever was heading their way. Admiral Kate Reed stood on the bridge of the Dauntless, hands clasped behind her back As she stared at the tactical display, the alien vessel dominated the screen, its unusual shape unlike anything she had seen in her 20 years of service. "Time to intercept," she asked, her voice calm despite the tension that filled the bridge. 30 minutes, Admiral," replied the navigation officer. Reed nodded. "And Epsilon 9. Still operational, but they're reporting shield damage from long-range scans. Whatever this thing is, it's just looking at them and causing damage." Reed turned to the tall, thin man standing quietly at the science station. "Dr. Wilson, any progress with the signal analysis?" Dr. Alan Wilson adjusted his glasses. "Yes, Admiral. The transmission is definitely artificial and contains mathematical sequences, prime numbers, Fibonacci sequences, basic geometric ratios. It's a common approach for first contact scenarios." "So they want to talk?" Wilson frowned. "Maybe. Or they're evaluating our intelligence before deciding if we're worth talking to." Reed considered this. As a veteran of the Mars conflict, she knew that peaceful intentions couldn't be assumed. "Prepare a response using the same mathematical principles. Let's show them we understand." Wilson nodded and began working with the communications team. 20 minutes later, the Dauntless slowed as it approached the massive alien ship. Up close, it was even more intimidating, nearly 4 kilometers long with strange, pulsing lights along its hull. What looked like weapon ports dotted its surface. "We're receiving a new transmission," announced the communications officer. "It's different." Wilson rushed over, eyes widening as he studied the incoming data. "They've switched to a more complex system based on our response. They're learning our communication patterns at an incredible rate." He worked frantically for several minutes, then looked up in surprise. "Admiral, I can partially translate now. They call themselves the Vex. They are claiming this sector as their territory." Wilson paused, his expression grave. "They say they have conquered 17 star systems, and Earth is to be the 18th. Reed's jaw tightened. "Send our response. We represent Earth and its colonies. This sector has been human territory for over a century. We seek peaceful contact, but will defend our worlds." The bridge crew waited in tense silence after the message was sent. The response came quickly. Wilson's face paled as he translated. "They say our defiance is expected but irrelevant. They've studied our technology and determined we pose no threat. We have 24 hours to begin evacuation of all military assets from the sector, or they will demonstrate their power." Reed's eyes narrowed. "Show them we're serious. Bring weapons to ready status, but do not target them directly." The tactical officer complied, and the Dauntless's weapon systems hummed to life. Almost immediately, the alien vessel reacted. A beam of intense blue light shot out, striking the Dauntless with pinpoint accuracy. The battlecruiser shuddered violently. "Damage report," Reed called out, steadying herself against a console. "Shields at 23%, Admiral. They cut through our defenses like they weren't even there." The tactical officer's voice cracked with disbelief. "One hit, and they nearly crippled us." Reed's mind raced. The Dauntless was Earth's most advanced warship, with shields designed to withstand multiple direct hits from any known weapon. And the Vex had nearly destroyed them with what appeared to be a warning shot. "Get us out of here," Reed ordered. "Maximum speed back to Earth defense perimeter." As the Dauntless turned away, another message came through. Wilson listened, then looked up with a grim expression. "They say they could destroy us now, but prefer we deliver their message to Earth. They're giving us safe passage." Reed stared at the alien vessel on the screen, its massive form silhouetted against the stars. The arrogance of the gesture wasn't lost on her. "Set course for Earth," she said quietly, "and prepare all data for immediate transmission to Defense Command. They need to know what we're facing." As the Dauntless limped away, Reed knew humanity had just encountered something that could change everything. The question was whether Earth would have time to prepare before the Vex decided their grace period was over. The United Defense Council chamber buzzed with urgent voices as Admiral Reed's report finished playing on the main screen. 50 of Earth's highest-ranking military and political leaders sat in stunned silence for several moments before the shouting began. "How can we fight something like that?" demanded General Harris, pounding his fist on the table. "We should negotiate," countered Ambassador Lee. "If they're this advanced, perhaps they can be reasoned with." Admiral Reed, still showing signs of fatigue from her encounter with the Vex ship, shook her head. "The Vex aren't interested in negotiation. They've given us an ultimatum: leave or be destroyed." Intelligence Officer Mike Thomas stood up, waiting for the room to quiet. At 35, he was younger than most present, but his reputation for analytical thinking had earned him a place at the table. "If I may," he said, activating his datapad, "I've been studying the sensor readings from the Dauntless. While the Vex technology is significantly advanced, it operates on principles we understand." The room's massive display changed to show detailed scans of the Vex vessel. "Their shield modulation follows predictable patterns," Thomas continued. "And during their weapon discharge, there's a momentary fluctuation in their defensive grid." Reed leaned forward. "Are you saying they have a weakness?" "Not exactly a weakness," Thomas replied cautiously. "More like a vulnerability we might exploit. With the right approach, we could potentially disrupt their shields during a weapons firing sequence." The council president, a stern woman with steel-gray hair, spoke for the first time. "Even if that's possible, the Dauntless barely escaped one Vex ship. How do we fight an entire fleet when they arrive?" Thomas glanced at Reed. "That's where the Admiral's observations become crucial. The Vex are technologically superior but tactically predictable. They followed standard attack protocols when engaging the Dauntless." "He's right," Reed confirmed. "Their movements were almost textbook. If it had been a human ship, I could have predicted every maneuver. They rely on overwhelming force rather than tactical innovation." A message alert chimed, and all eyes turned to the display. The Vex had begun their promised demonstration. Live feeds showed 3 outer colony outposts systematically destroyed by precision strikes. Each attack followed the same pattern: shields first, then communications, then power systems. "They're showing us how they'll dismantle our defenses," Reed said quietly, "and giving us valuable data in the process." Thomas added, "Each attack confirms my analysis. Their shield modulation drops by 6.3% for 1.7 seconds when they fire their main weapons." The council president's eyes narrowed. "And what do you propose we do with this information, Officer Thomas?" Thomas looked at Reed. "We need to develop a quantum frequency disruptor calibrated to the exact shield modulation of the Vex vessels. If we can deliver it during that 1.7-second window, we might create a breach." Reed nodded slowly. "We'd need a small, fast ship to get close enough during an attack. It would be a suicide mission." "Not necessarily," Thomas countered. "If we time it perfectly, a stealth vessel might slip through." The room grew quiet as the implications sank in. It was a desperate plan, but perhaps their only option. "I'll lead the mission," Reed said firmly. The council president studied her for a long moment. "Very well, Admiral. You have authority to assemble whatever team and resources you need. The rest of the fleet will prepare defensive positions throughout the system." As the meeting adjourned, Reed pulled Thomas aside. "We'll need Earth's best engineer to develop this disruptor. Get me Dr. Lisa Moore." Thomas nodded. "Already sent for her. She's waiting in your office." Reed managed a tight smile. "Good. And find Lieutenant Jack Peters. If anyone can pilot a ship close enough to plant this device without being detected, it's him." Thomas's expression grew concerned. "Peters was disciplined after the Ganymede incident. He's been grounded for months." "I don't need a rule follower," Reed replied. "I need someone crazy enough to fly into the heart of enemy fire and skilled enough to come back alive." Thomas nodded reluctantly. "I'll have him on the next transport." As they walked out, Emergency alerts flashed on every screen. The Vex had destroyed another outpost, moving steadily closer to Earth. Their time was running out. Dr. Lisa Moore barely looked up when Admiral Reed entered the laboratory. Her hands moved with practiced precision as she adjusted the delicate components of the device on her workbench. Dark circles under her eyes suggested she hadn't slept in days. "Tell me you have good news," Reed said, watching the engineer work. Moore tightened a final connection before responding. "Define good news. If you mean, can I build a device that might disrupt Vex shields? Then yes. If you mean, will it definitely work? Then no." Reed smiled despite herself. Moore's bluntness was refreshing after days of cautious military speak. "I'll take might at this point. How does it work?" Moore held up a small cylindrical device, barely larger than her hand. "It generates a focused quantum pulse calibrated to the exact frequency of the Vex shield modulation. When they fire their main weapons, there's a brief energy transfer that creates a vulnerability. This exploits that vulnerability by amplifying the fluctuation. And the result? In theory, it creates a cascading failure in their shield grid, a temporary window, perhaps 30 seconds, where a section of their shields will collapse completely." Reed nodded. 30 seconds is enough if our fleet is ready to concentrate fire." "There's a catch," Moore said, setting the device down carefully. "It has to be placed within 50 meters of their main shield generator, and it has to be triggered manually at the exact moment they fire." Reed's expression didn't change, but her eyes tightened slightly. "So we need to get someone onto the Vex ship." "I'm afraid so." The door slid open, and a man in a faded flight suit strolled in. Lieutenant Jack Peters was shorter than most pilots, with a crooked smile that never quite reached his eyes. The scar running down his left cheek was still pink, a souvenir from the Ganymede incident that had cost him his wings. "I hear you're looking for someone stupid enough to fly a suicide mission," he said casually. Reed gave him a measured look. "It's only suicide if you fail, Lieutenant." Peters laughed. "In my experience, Admiral, that's true of most things in life." He picked up Moore's device, examining it with practiced eyes. "So this little beauty is supposed to save humanity." Moore snatched it back. "Careful. And yes, if it's placed correctly, it could give us a fighting chance." Peters nodded, suddenly serious. "I've studied the Vex attack patterns from the colony strikes. They hover in specific formations when firing their main weapons. There's a cooling vent near their engine section that might work as an entry point." Reed raised an eyebrow. "How did you know about the cooling vent? Those scans are classified." Peters shrugged. "I have friends in interesting places. The point is, I can get a small ship close enough during an attack sequence." Moore looked skeptical. "Even with the shield fluctuation, you'd be detected as soon as you approach." "Not if I use a gravity slingshot around Europa during their next attack," Peters countered. "They're scheduled to hit the Jupiter colony tomorrow. Their sensors will be focused on the colony defenses." Reed studied him carefully. "You seem to have given this a lot of thought for someone who just learned about the mission." Peters met her gaze without flinching. "Let's just say I've been planning my comeback since they grounded me. This seemed like a good opportunity." Reed turned to Moore. "How many of these devices can you build in the next 24 hours? 3, maybe 4 if I push my team to the limit." "Do it," Reed ordered. "And make sure each one can be operated independently." She turned back to Peters. "You'll command one ship. I'm sending 2 others as backup." Peters nodded. "Fair enough, though they'll just be decoys. Only one ship needs to get through." "And you think it will be yours?" Reed said. It wasn't a question. Peters smiled that crooked smile again. "Admiral, if I didn't think I could do the impossible, I wouldn't be standing here now." Reed held his gaze for a long moment, then nodded. "Report to the Mars shipyard at 600. The stealth vessels will be prepped and waiting." As Peters left, Moore looked at Reed with concern. "You're putting a lot of faith in someone with his record." Reed watched the door close behind him. Sometimes, Doctor, the people best suited for impossible missions are the ones with something to prove. She picked up the disruptor. Just make sure this works when he gets it there. Moore sighed and returned to her workbench. No pressure. Then, the chaos of battle surrounded them as 3 stealth vessels broke away from Earth's defensive line. Jupiter's moon Europa burned in the distance, the Vex attack already underway. Lieutenant Peters piloted the lead ship, named Phantom, his hands steady on the controls despite the flashes of weapon fire lighting up space around them. This is Phantom to wing. Radio silence from here on out. Remember your approach vectors and good luck. Peters said into his comm. The other 2 ships acknowledged briefly before all 3 cut communications. Peters glanced at his small crew, 2 engineers and a security officer. Their faces showed the strain of knowing what lay ahead, but none showed fear. Beginning slingshot maneuver, Peters announced, guiding the Phantom into Europa's gravitational field. The little ship shuddered as he pushed it harder than its designers had intended. On his tactical display, Peters watched as the second stealth vessel, the Shadow, veered slightly off course. A moment later, a beam of blue energy from the Vex flagship cut through space, vaporizing the Shadow instantly. They've spotted the decoys, muttered Davis, the security officer. Peters didn't respond, focusing instead on the delicate gravitational dance that was accelerating their ship to dangerous speeds. The third vessel, the Ghost, lasted another 3 minutes before Vex weapons found it too. The Phantom shot out of Europa's gravity well like a bullet, hurtling directly toward the massive Vex flagship. Peters kept the ship's profile aligned with the debris from the battle, making them harder to distinguish from wreckage. Approaching target, Peters said, his voice tight with concentration. Cooling vent is visible, preparing for insertion. The Phantom slowed just enough to avoid crashing as Peters guided it into a massive thermal vent on the Vex ship's underside. The sudden shift from open space to the confined tunnel caused alarms to blare throughout the small vessel. Hull temperature rising, reported Taylor, one of the engineers. We can't stay in here long. Won't be staying anywhere long if we don't complete the mission, Peters replied, bringing the Phantom to a stop inside a junction where several cooling tunnels connected. Suit up. We go in through there. The team donned their space armor and checked their weapons. The disruptor device was secured in a specialized container on Peters' back. They moved through the airlock and into the alien ship's cooling system, their magnetic boots keeping them anchored in the zero gravity. According to the scans, we need to head toward the central core, Taylor said, consulting the holographic map projected from his wrist unit. The shield generator should be 2 levels up from there. They moved carefully through the labyrinthine tunnels until they reached a maintenance hatch. Davis overrode the alien security system using codes developed from previous Vex encounters, and they slipped into the ship proper. The interior of the Vex vessel was unlike anything they had expected. Strange organic-looking surfaces covered in pulsing lights stretched in every direction. The gravity was slightly stronger than Earth normal, making movement more difficult in their heavy suits. Movement ahead, Davis whispered, raising his weapon. A Vex crew member rounded the corner. It stood nearly 3 meters tall, with an insectoid body and gleaming technological implants covering much of its exoskeleton. Before the alien could react, Davis fired a silenced pulse shot that dropped it without a sound. They're bigger than the intel suggested, Taylor said nervously. Peters checked the alien to ensure it was dead. Doesn't matter. The bigger they are, the harder they hit, Davis finished grimly. They continued through the ship, using maintenance ducts when possible to avoid detection. Twice more, they encountered Vex crew members, dispatching them quickly and hiding the bodies. After 20 minutes of careful progress, they reached the central core, a massive chamber filled with pulsing energy conduits. The shield generator is directly above us, Taylor whispered, pointing to the ceiling where energy streams converge. They found an access ladder and climbed upward, emerging into a room dominated by a spinning orb of blue-white energy suspended within a complex framework of alien technology. That's it, Taylor confirmed. The quantum frequency stabilizer. Plant the disruptor there. He pointed to a junction box where several conduits met. Peters removed the device from his container and began attaching it to the indicated location. He had just finished the final connection when an alarm began blaring throughout the ship. "We've been detected," Davis called out, taking up a defensive position near the entrance. "Multiple hostiles approaching." Peters activated the disruptor, setting it to trigger on the next weapon's discharge. "Done. Let's move." But as they turned to leave, the doors slid open and a squad of Vex soldiers poured in, weapons raised. Gunfire erupted in the shield generator room. Davis dropped 2 Vex soldiers with precise shots before taking the hit to his shoulder. He stumbled backward but kept firing. "Get to the extraction point," Peters shouted, pulling Taylor behind a piece of equipment as energy bolts flew past them. "But the disruptor," Taylor began. "Is already set," Peters cut him off. "It'll trigger when they fire their main weapons. We need to move." Davis provided covering fire as they retreated through a side access panel. Taylor helped the injured security officer, while Peters led the way through maintenance tunnels. "The Phantom is 3 levels down," Taylor said, consulting his map. "We have 8 minutes before the Vex reach firing position against Earth's fleet." They had descended 1 level when the ship suddenly shuddered. The lights flickered, and the artificial gravity briefly failed. "What was that?" Davis gasped, clutching his wounded shoulder. Peters checked his tactical display. "Admiral Reed has engaged the Vex. She's drawing their fire." The 3 men moved faster, racing against time. They reached the 2nd level when they encountered another Vex patrol. Peters and Davis fired simultaneously, dropping 2 aliens, but the 3rd got off a shot that hit Taylor square in the chest. He collapsed without a sound. "No." Peters dragged his fallen comrade behind cover, while Davis eliminated the last Vex soldier. "He's gone," Davis said grimly after checking Taylor's vitals. "No pulse." Peters took a deep breath, then removed Taylor's data unit. "We keep moving. We finish this." They continued downward, eventually reaching the cooling vent where they had left the Phantom. Only 3 minutes remained before the predicted weapon firing. "Get aboard and start the engines," Peters ordered Davis as they approached the ship. "I'll cover." An energy bolt struck Davis from behind. He crumpled forward without a sound. Peters spun around to see 5 Vex soldiers advancing, their weapons trained on him. In one fluid motion, Peters threw himself sideways, firing as he moved. 2 Vex fell, but a bolt grazed his leg, sending burning pain up his side. He made it to the Phantom's airlock, slapping the emergency close button as more energy bolts hit the ship's hull. Peters dragged himself to the cockpit, leaving a trail of blood behind him. His hands trembled as he activated the engines. The Phantom's systems came online sluggishly, damaged from the weapon impacts. "Come on," he muttered, feeling the vibration as the Vex flagship's weapons began charging for a full attack on Earth's fleet. The Phantom detached from the cooling vent and began accelerating away from the Vex ship. Peters had barely cleared the flagship when he saw the main weapons begin to glow with building energy. "Now or never," he whispered. The Vex weapons fired, massive beams of destructive energy lancing toward Earth's defensive line. At that exact moment, the disruptor activated. A visible ripple spread across the Vex flagship's shields, followed by a cascading failure that left a quarter of the ship completely unprotected. Admiral Reed, watching from the bridge of her command ship Phoenix, saw it happen. "There's our window. All ships, concentrate fire on the exposed section," she ordered. Earth's fleet responded immediately. Hundreds of missiles and energy weapons struck the Vex flagship's vulnerable area. The massive alien vessel shuddered under the assault, secondary explosions blooming across its hull. Peters watched from the limping Phantom as humanity landed its first effective blow against the seemingly invincible enemy. The Vex flagship listed to one side, its weapons going dark. For a moment, it appeared the battle was won. Then, the alien vessel began emitting a powerful signal. Earth's sensors detected a massive data transmission directed toward distant space. Reed ordered it intercepted and analyzed immediately. Dr. Wilson, now stationed aboard the Phoenix, worked frantically to interpret the alien communication. "Admiral," he called out, his voice tense with urgency. "It's a distress signal. They're calling for reinforcements." "How long until they arrive?" Reed asked. Wilson's face paled as he translated the rest of the message. 6 months. But there's more. The transmission includes complete technical data on their ship, including the damage assessment from our attack. Reed's eyes widened as she understood the implications. "They've just told us exactly how we hurt them, and provided detailed schematics of their technology," Wilson confirmed. The bridge fell silent as this information sank in. Then Dr. Moore, who had been monitoring from a science station, spoke up. "Give me those schematics," she said, her eyes bright with possibilities. "With this data, I can reverse engineer their shield technology, maybe even their weapons systems." Reed looked at the damaged Vex flagship on her screen, then at the small blip that represented Peter's returning ship. 6 months, she said quietly. 6 months to turn their own technology against them. She opened a channel to all Earth forces. "The battle is won, but the war is just beginning. Secure the disabled Vex vessel. I want every piece of technology analyzed and understood." As Earth's fleet moved to surround the crippled alien ship, Peters guided the damaged Phantom toward home, carrying with him the knowledge that humanity had found its first real hope. 6 months passed in a blur of feverish activity. Every shipyard on Earth and Mars worked around the clock, retrofitting vessels with technology derived from the Vex. Dr. Moore led the engineering efforts, barely sleeping as she translated alien concepts into human applications. Admiral Reed stood on the observation deck of the newly commissioned Phoenix I, Earth's first ship to fully incorporate Vex shield technology. Through the viewport, she could see dozens of similarly upgraded vessels arranged in defensive formation around Earth. "Status report," she requested as Captain Peters joined her. His promotion had come after his return from the Vex flagship, along with Earth's highest military honors. The scar on his leg still caused him to walk with a slight limp. "The outer sensor arrays have detected 15 Vex war vessels entering the solar system," Peters reported, "all larger than the scout ship we encountered. They'll reach Mars orbit in approximately 6 hours. Reed nodded, her face calm despite the gravity of the situation. "And our forces. 28 capital ships with the new shield technology, 42 support vessels with upgraded weapon systems, all crews at battle stations." Reed turned to face him fully. "And the Phoenix I." Peters allowed himself a small smile. "Dr. Moore says the integrated Vex technology is functioning at 92% efficiency. We won't know for certain until we engage, but in simulations, we've matched their shield strength. It will have to be enough," Reed said, turning back to the viewport. "Humanity doesn't get a second chance." The next 6 hours passed with tense preparation. When the Vex Armada finally appeared, 15 massive war vessels arranged in perfect formation, Earth's defenders were ready. "They're transmitting," announced Communications Officer Taylor, named after his fallen comrade from the infiltration mission. "Same message as before. Surrender or be destroyed." Reed took her command chair at the center of the bridge. "Send our response." Taylor pressed a button, and Reed's prepared message transmitted. "This is Admiral Kate Reed of Earth Defense Forces. We do not recognize your claim to this sector and will not surrender. Withdraw immediately or face the consequences of your aggression." Peters, standing at tactical, raised an eyebrow. "Think they'll be surprised by our defiance?" "They're about to be surprised by more than that," Reed replied. The lead Vex vessel fired without further communication. A massive energy beam shot toward the Phoenix I. The bridge crew tensed, many closing their eyes instinctively, remembering how easily the Dauntless had been crippled by such an attack. The beam struck, and the Phoenix I's shields held. "Shields at 87%, reported the tactical officer, disbelief in his voice. "Minimal power fluctuation." Reed allowed herself a moment of satisfaction before giving the order. All ships, engage according to Battle Plan Alpha. Concentrate fire on designated targets. Earth's fleet moved with coordinated precision, splitting into pre-assigned groups to target specific Vex vessels. The Phoenix Eye led the charge against the Vex flagship, its weapons now enhanced with the aliens' own technology. The space between Earth and Mars became a storm of energy beams and explosions. 3 human ships were lost in the initial exchange, but 2 Vex vessels suffered critical damage. The battle raged for hours, neither side gaining clear advantage. On the Phoenix Eye's bridge, Reed received a direct communication request from the Vex flagship. With a nod to Taylor, she accepted it. A holographic image appeared, the first clear view of a Vex leader. The insectoid creature's exoskeleton gleamed with integrated technology, its compound eyes reflecting the lights of its control center. "You have adapted," the alien said, its words translated by Dr. Wilson's linguistic program. This was not predicted. Reed stood tall. "Humanity specializes in the unpredictable. You should have studied us more carefully before attacking." The Vex commander's antennae twitched. "The cost of continued conflict is now inefficient. We propose cessation of hostilities and establishment of territorial boundaries." Peters looked at Reed in surprise. "They're offering peace talks." Reed maintained her focus on the alien image. "Return to your space. This sector remains under human protection. If you wish to establish diplomatic relations, you may send a single unarmed vessel to Earth orbit in 30 days. The Vex commander was silent for a long moment before responding. "Acceptable terms. Combat operations will cease." As the communication ended, cheers erupted across the bridge. Reed silenced them with a raised hand. "The Vex aren't retreating because they're generous," she cautioned. "They're retreating because for the first time, the equation doesn't favor them. Stay alert until they've left the system." Peters moved to stand beside her. "What happens now, Admiral?" Reed watched as the Vex vessels began to withdraw. "Now we prepare. Today we defended our home. Tomorrow, we take our place among the stars." She turned to him with newfound determination. "And I want you to lead our first diplomatic mission to Vex space." Peters straightened despite his injured leg. "It would be my honor, Admiral." As Earth celebrated its unexpected victory, Reed looked out at the stars, knowing that humanity had crossed a threshold. They were no longer alone, no longer confined to their small corner of the galaxy. They had been tested and had proven their worth. The sector breach had become humanity's gateway to the stars.